DeSean Jackson, who made headlines this week, obviously with some of his anti-Semitic comments during the week. And folks, in this day and age, in the life and the times that we're living in, if you have these kind of feelings inside of you, then find a way to get rid of them, because I think that there should be ramifications for stuff like this. And I'm just trying to find there we go. I know the guy is talented, but he was punished by the Eagles this week. He has had discussions with Mr. Lurie, Jeff Lurie, the owner, general manager Howie Roseman, who both happen to be of Jewish faith. And I think in this case, I believe in my heart of hearts, again, considering everything that we're going through right now and all this Black Lives Matter stuff and all this other stuff, and rightfully so, all of these statues are being taken out in front of stadiums, and mentions of guys like George Marshall off the wall of fame, the Washington Redskins, because the original owner of the Redskins obviously had some problems with racism and diversity. I get that. But then why was DeSean Jackson's punishment only a fine? Again, especially if the owner and the general manager are both of the Jewish faith. And I am of the belief, and I know again that DeSean Jackson's a very talented wide receiver, but he's made a horrific mistake here, folks. And I think at the very least, he should have been released. I think his days as playing wide receiver for the Philadelphia Eagles should be over, because if we have to watch basically almost every word that comes out of our mouths these days, I think when you do something like this, there should be penalties more than a fine. A fine to a National Football League player to me is nothing. It's peanuts. He's going through counseling and all this other stuff, and that's great. And he's had a talk to from everybody on the Eagles organization. But I think in this instance, in the times and the days that we're living in right now, DeSean Jackson should, in my opinion, be looking for another team.
Well, I think they were worried about setting a double standard as a franchise, because if you remember, the Philadelphia Eagles used to have a white wide receiver,
Riley Cooper,
and he used the N-word, which is crazy for when you're playing in the NFL, and they didn't release him. So everyone would look back and say, well, you didn't release this guy when he did something arguably, as bad or worse, and so how can you do it now? So
different times.
Well,
I don't mean to interject. I don't mean to interject, and everybody has an opinion. But again, I think we even have to take it up a few notches in regard to sensitivity these days. And I think that this would have sent an unbelievable message, especially the Philadelphia Eagles, after what they did with Riley Cooper. And I don't agree. I think Riley Cooper should have been let go a couple of years ago. But I think this begs the question: if DeSean Jackson was a special teamer or a scrub, or on the practice squad, A, we wouldn't be talking about it, and B, I think he silently would have been shown the door. But because this guy is a former Pro Bowl player, he's getting in my opinion, he's getting an extension. He's getting a lifeline, because he's a hell of a wide receiver, in my opinion.
Well, I read all the stuff he posted, and to me, and I'm not trying to be the PR agent for DeSean Jackson by any means or anything here, but I really think when I look at what he wrote and what he later highlighted, I think that he was so zeroed in on the pro-black stuff that he wasn't even thinking about all the other stuff. And so, he's not thinking, I don't think he meant to be anti-Semitic. I don't think that was ever the intent. I don't see that at all. I mean, he was just zeroed in on, he saw some pro-African-American language and some words like that, and he was just zeroed in on that, and he posted it. And I'm sure that's all that happened.
And I don't disagree with you, but I look at general people, general citizens of North America. If you hear a white person use the N-word, they're automatically just pieces of crap.
That's it, yeah.
And yet if you go, and I've seen this, if you go to a particular place where maybe, and again, where a great contingent of African Americans are together, like at Rucker Park in New York, watching them play the great Rucker Park tournaments that they have in New York City, and you hear the N-word all over the place. But they don't they don't have the ramifications or don't suffer the ramifications of using the N-word. But if a white guy uses the N-word, he just becomes public enemy number one. And I think that there's a lot in this thing by allowing DeSean Jackson to stay on the roster, regardless of what you said, and you're right. But it sends a bad message, in my point, because he's getting away with things that maybe less talented athletes aren't going to have the same. I don't know. And I think I don't blame DeSean Jackson as much as I do blame the owner and the general manager. I think they should have the cojones to get rid of this guy.
And DeSean Jackson is getting old, frankly. I don't know that they kept him around because of any sort of team need or anything like that. I have a hard, if it's one of the top guys on the team, then sure, but I don't think he is anymore. Last year he played and looked really good in week 1, and then the rest of the year he caught one pass and was out the rest of the year with injury. And I know because I had him on my fantasy team. I still won the league, so it's okay.
There you go.
But
we won't fire him.
Yeah, that was really disappointing. But look, I think a lot of minorities are so used to, they just have to really be all about espousing and advocating for their culture or group or whatever they're for, that they don't really have to factor in certain other ones potentially. I don't think a lot of black people are used to having to make sure that they're being sensitive to the Jewish community. As a white person, I know that I have to be I can't get away with anything, even if I wanted to. Like
No.
I can't make fun of any. I'm a white male and I'm straight. Like, I mean, I can't say anything about anyone, right? I remember Chris Rock, I'm almost out of frustration, I think years ago, he tried to come up with an equivalent of the N-word for black people to use on white people.
Right.
And it was on Saturday Night Live, and I think he was hoping it would get a lot of play, and maybe if this had happened in the days of social media, maybe it would have, but this was happening in the early 90s, I think he was
Late
this
80s,
segment.
early 90s.
Yeah, something like that. And he came on there and he said, he came up with the word, do you know what word he came up with instead of the N-word? He came up with Yaku. He's like, Yaku, and he wanted that to be like the black, word that black people could use to make fun of white people instead of the N-word, and he wanted that to be this horrible word that white people would just hate, and it never took off or anything, and maybe it would have today, and maybe this clip will go crazy, and I'll see this, and I'll lead to this word being horrible, but look, I just think that what people like DeSean Jackson need to learn is that it's not just about promoting, the viewpoints of black people. You also have to factor in all the other groups. It's not as simple and one-dimensional as, just say anything pro-black, and if we hurt some Jewish people along the way, big deal, that's just collateral damage. You can't think like that. If you were going to have this conversation in a mature way and in an expedited way like we are these days, then you're going to have to consider all viewpoints and have a little more awareness before you post anything on social media.